Boldwood presents The Cottage by the Sea, written by Keri Beevis and read by Shakira Shute. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. This one is for my Long Melford family, cousins Beth and Ruth, and in memory of Auntie Irene. Part 1. Something wicked this way comes. William Shakespeare. Chapter 1. Norfolk, England. My name is Harper. I'm an author of romance novels, now trying to write my own love story. Too cheesy? Harper Reed backspaced, deleting the opening sentence of her online dating profile, and took a generous sip of wine as she considered again what to write. Megan's words rang in her head. Be honest. Dress it up a little, but be you. Her best friend had met her husband online a couple of years ago, and she had been full of advice. Harper knew Megan was right, but still she was self-conscious. Words were her day job, and she wrote 2 novels a year, so why was creating an online dating profile so bloody difficult? Maybe because she'd had to battle her nerves to sign up. She had never done this kind of thing before. Of course, she had dated, but not in a long time, and things had changed a lot in the last 10 years. This online way of meeting people was completely alien to her. She had been introduced to her husband, Charlie, at a barbecue of a mutual friend. Now it seemed the internet and social media was the main way people met. The wine was going down too fast, and guilt stabbed at her as she reached for the bottle to top up her glass. Even setting up a profile had required the crutch of alcohol, so she dreaded to think how her nerves would hold up if she went on an actual date. A year ago, she wouldn't have even contemplated doing this. But things changed. Megan was right. A further 12 months had passed, and she was existing day to day in this big house all alone. It had been her sanctuary, but also her prison, and she had to find a way to move forward, aware that she needed to start living again. The first step she had taken was to get a dog. A cute black cocker spaniel called Bailey, who had found himself in the shelter she used to volunteer with after his elderly owner died. She had felt a connection with him the moment they met, perhaps because of the circumstances of how he had ended up homeless, and it felt like they were choosing each other. It wasn't until he had come home with her that Harper had realized just how quiet and empty the house had become, and how much she needed him there. Having the commitment of another being to look after also got her outside each day, where she could feel the fresh air on her face and see other people. It had been so easy to stay indoors, cocooning herself away from the rest of the world, and it didn't help that she worked from home. Before Bailey, she had no reason to leave, and the longer she had stayed inside, the more difficult it had been to step foot out of the front door. It was early days with him. He had been here just 6 weeks, but already he was giving her a purpose to get up each morning. And while her belly had been jittery with nerves the first time they'd ventured out, her confidence was steadily growing. She no longer tensed if she saw someone heading towards her, knowing they might stop to chat. From talking to strangers who wanted to pet her dog, to online dating seemed a big step. But Harper knew she had to bite the bullet. She and Charlie had always planned to start a family. It's why they had left London and moved to Norfolk, and it was why they had bought this big house. Despite everything that had happened, she still wanted that dream. Although she had pushed everyone away, she realized she didn't want to be alone. She wanted to fall in love again, just as she wanted the sound of children's laughter echoing around the walls of the house. She needed a second chance. The dating site she was registering with was called IntoYou. and it was one of the more reputable companies that charged a fee, aiming to match those who were serious about finding the right one. It was where Megan had met Tom, and she had highly recommended it. Deciding to return to her icebreaker intro when she could think of something that sounded better, Harper skipped ahead to the next section. What qualities are you looking for? Another loaded question. Did she really know? She typed even as she was running the answer through in her head. Kindness, honesty, respect. Someone who knows that laughter and a sense of humour are important. That had been her and Charlie in the beginning, teasing each other out of a bad mood, finding the same things funny. And she had always got a kick from knowing that when her husband laughed, she had been the one to put the smile on his face. She had thought they still had that to the very end. But when she looked back now, she could see how the humour had gradually disappeared from their lives. As for the kindness, honesty and respect, they came top of the list for her, and having had and lost them, she understood just how important they were. Fresh doubts crept in. Could she really go through with this? She was painting a confident picture, and no potential suitor would realise it was all smoke and mirrors, that truthfully, she was a pathetic mess, that until recently she had struggled to leave the house. Ignoring the kneading ball of panic in her stomach, she went to the next section. Location, sexual orientation, age, and dependence were easy, and she box-ticked. It was her marital status that threw her. Widowed was an option, but she was reluctant to select it. What if it put men off? Harper was 37 and had already buried her husband. An awkward conversation topic from the word go, especially given the circumstances. She desperately wanted to start fresh, and would rather not discuss any of what had happened unless she had reached a point where she was comfortable with someone. Even then it would be difficult. She decided against ticking the box, instead selecting single. It wasn't really a lie. She was alone. The "do I want children" question also made her pause. Would her eagerness be off-putting? Screw it. She didn't want any time-wasters. She ticked the yes box, knowing that if she was asking for honesty, she had to be truthful back. She returned to her icebreaker, taking a large sip of wine, acutely aware it was her shop window, her one chance to sell herself, and she had just 400 words. God, that sounded awful. It made it sound like she was an item for purchase. It was true, though. It was technically a meat market, no matter how it was dressed up. Everyone was shopping for flesh. She tried to think of something witty, aware people liked funny. Although she hadn't had much humour in her life over the last 2 years, she had once been the girl who could make people laugh. Not anymore, though. Instead, she imagined the sassy lead character from her best-selling novel, Not Another Love Story. Natalie Jones was headstrong, passionate, and had a dry, self-deprecating sense of humour. She was how Harper had been before she had lost her confidence. Could she conjure her up? How would Natalie write an online dating profile? It was a tall task. Not Another Love Story had been published almost a year before her world had fallen apart, and although Harper had tried her best to reinvent the character, she knew her recent work was lacking that magic touch. She had been going through the motions, and suspected her agent knew it too. The sales for her newer releases hadn't been great, and her royalties were no longer covering the bills. If it wasn't for Charlie's will and the life insurance, she would have been struggling for money. Earning her keep was now a matter of pride. She had once been a full-time writer, paying her own way, and she needed to get back to that. If she could pull herself out of this slump and start living again, she hoped she would find her mojo. But to do that, she had to first write this damn intro. She frowned at the screen of the MacBook before trying again. Writer, daydreamer, dogmum. Terrible cook. Seriously, I burn pasta. I like people-watching, the feel of the sun on my face, the cold side of the pillow, and orange Smarties. Favourite food? Mexican. Last film I cried at, Marley and Me. Guilty pleasure, Footloose. What's yours? That was better. She could always come back and tweak it at a later date. Finally, it was time to upload her photo. The idea filled her with dread, but Megan had told her that without a picture, no one would message her. It made sense, Harper guessed. She wouldn't want to start talking to someone with a view to becoming romantically involved if she didn't know what they looked like. Megan had already chosen a photo for her, a picture she had taken of Harper about a year ago when she had visited for the weekend. It was one of the rare ones where she was smiling and seemed genuinely happy. Still, she worried. Should she pick something else? Perhaps one that was more recent? Not that she had anything newer. A different photo would involve taking a selfie, and gamely she picked up her phone, clicked on the front camera. The face staring back at her was sickly white, the dark circles under her eyes accentuated, and her blonde hair hanging limply around her face. Shuddering, she backtracked to the home screen, thinking better of the idea. Styling her hair and putting on a bit of makeup might make a difference, but she didn't have the inclination. Megan's photo it would be. Harper uploaded it from the email her friend had sent her, then reread the answers on the dating form. Butterflies swarmed in her stomach as the cursor hovered over the Create button on the screen. Once she had clicked it, her profile would be live, available for everyone to see. Was she really doing this? Drawing in a breath, she rolled her shoulders back to try to ease the tension out of them. She had to. If she wanted to get the future she craved, she needed to start living again. Be brave. As she pressed the button, joining the thousands of other members who were looking for love, she reminded herself it was just an app, and she was in control. No one could message her unless she had hearted their profile. It would all be okay. After all, what was the worst that could happen? Chapter 2. It didn't take long to get a match. The idea of IntoYou was similar to Tinder, but instead of swiping, you hearted the profiles the app showed you. Once a user was hearted, they were able to send a direct message. Initially, the hearting bit had intimidated Harper. It was just weird reading someone's information and looking at their photo, then letting them know she had liked what she had seen. Everyone was doing it, Megan had assured her, saying she would get used to it. And she was right. It was a strange process, but over the following days, familiarity with the site and knowing that every other user was doing the same thing made it that little bit easier. Still, Harper was tentative with her hearts, studying each profile carefully, and perhaps taking the whole process far more seriously than she should. She had received a number of hearts herself, but there was no one she wanted to talk to. Either they didn't have a profile picture, or the information they gave suggested they wouldn't be a suitable match. Almost a week after she had registered, 2 of the profiles she had hearted messaged her, and while one fell by the wayside quickly, a good-looking guy with 0 conversational skills who kept making dirty innuendos, making him seem less attractive by the second, she had more success with the second one. Adrian was 38 and worked in IT, and his photo showed him to be boyishly attractive, with dark hair and an appealing smile. She had exchanged a dozen or so messages with him on IntoYou before handing over her phone number, where the conversation had moved over onto WhatsApp, and they had spent a couple of days of messaging before he had asked her if she fancied meeting for a drink. Pushing herself to be brave, she had accepted. Now, the following day, as she stood in her bedroom assessing her reflection in the full-length mirror, she wanted to be sick. What the hell had she been thinking? In exactly 1 hour, she was supposed to be walking into a pub for a date with a man she had met on the internet. Was she insane? She couldn't go through with this. The date had been on her mind pretty much all day, to the point that she couldn't concentrate on writing, managing only 700 of her usual 3,000 a day word count, and she had ended up taking Bailey for a long walk to try to calm her nerves. It had worked, albeit briefly. Now her panicked brain was going into overdrive. What if he sees me and is disappointed? What if I see him and he isn't who he claims to be? What if I clam up and we sit there in awkward silence? What if I have a full-blown panic attack? She was about to WhatsApp Adrian and back out when Megan FaceTimed her to wish her luck. "I'm not going. I can't do this." "Harper, stop and take a few deep breaths. It's too soon. I should never have signed up to the site. You're just having a moment," Megan told her. "And that's okay. Of course you are going to be nervous. This is a huge deal for you. But I promise you that once you've done it, you will be so proud of yourself." "You don't know that," Harper argued. "What if I have a panic attack and make a fool of myself?" "You won't. But even if you do, it will be okay. Everyone gets a little scared doing this sort of thing, even if they don't show it. Adrian will be nervous too. You've got this, Harper, I promise you. You're doing really well. This is just one more little step to conquer." Megan was always so rational, and listening to her explain how it was normal to be anxious helped to ease some of the tension. She reminded Harper that there was no commitment, that this was just 2 people meeting for a no-strings-attached drink, and she could bail at any point. It was going to be okay. She hadn't failed so far. She could do this. "I want you to message me when you get home, okay?" Megan instructed. "And even if you are getting along really well, I want you to promise me that you won't invite him back or get in his car, or agree to go home with him." Harper bubbled with nervous laughter. If Megan thought sex was on the cards, then she was woefully off track. Even if she hit it off with Adrian tonight, nothing was going to happen. Not until she was comfortable and ready. And given that she hadn't been intimate with anyone since Charlie, that was a while off. Still, she appreciated her friend spending time talking to her and calming her down. It was the one thing she had found difficult when they had made the move from London, leaving Megan behind. It had been Charlie's idea to relocate to Norfolk. On his visits to the county, he had done a recce of the area, finding their house, which was just outside the village of Salhouse. It was an older-style detached property with generously sized rooms. At first, Harper had been unsure. Her whole life was in London, and she was used to the hustle and bustle of a city. Was she ready to give it all up for a move to the countryside? Charlie had been persuasive, though. He had been reading all about the benefits of living in Norfolk, the lower crime rate, a more relaxed pace of life, and if they wanted to start a family, this was the place to do it. The house was a place they could put their stamp on, and they had the money to do so, thanks to a generous inheritance left to Charlie from his wealthy late grandfather. It had been a bone of contention with Charlie's dad, Cosmo, that the estate had been split equally between them. Not that Charlie didn't work hard to make his own money. He was employed by a hotel chain based in London, but much of his time was spent on the road, travelling around the portfolio of properties his company owned, where he liaised with the hotel managers over maintenance and budget. A couple of the hotels were based in East Anglia, he had pointed out in favour of the move, with one in Norfolk itself, so it would make things easier for him. Meanwhile, Harper's job as an author meant she could work from anywhere. Eventually, she had relented, and for a while they had lived the dream, making the move out of London and building their new home together. And, yes, Charlie had been right. Norfolk was a lovely place, but his job meant he was often away overnight. In London, Harper hadn't minded so much, but their new home was remote, and she noticed his absences more. In a bid to meet new people, she had tried to get out and about, joining a local community page on Facebook and introducing herself as new to the area. As a result, she'd ended up with most of her evenings filled. She had signed up to the gym, joined a running group, then a book club, volunteered for a small animal rehoming charity, and taken a yoga class. It was at yoga where she had first encountered Alicia, a slightly younger, confident woman with a similar sense of humour. And for a while, Alicia had helped fill the hole of Megan not being there. Though, not anymore. Alicia was gone too. Now it was just Harper. And sometimes it felt like Megan was the only person left in her life. After Charlie had died, Harper had put all activities on hold while she grieved. There were other friends she had made, and many of them reached out to her to offer their condolences, but it was all so awkward, and they weren't people she had formed enough of an attachment to that she felt she could ask for help. Instead, she had holed herself up in the house alone, the worst possible thing she could have done, as it gradually ate away at her confidence. And when she didn't return to book club, or the animal shelter, or any of the groups she had joined, over time, everyone stopped contacting her. Move back to London, Megan had urged on more than one occasion, as if it would be easy to just uproot and leave. After Charlie's death, everything had become too much effort, too overwhelming. Harper hated that she had given in to the grief and depression, allowing herself to sink so low that she had at one point become borderline agoraphobic. But she was fighting her way back to the surface. The last couple of times Megan had come to stay, they had ventured out of the house, spending time around other people, and now Harper was actively pushing herself to claim her life back. Tonight, she was taking her biggest step. After saying goodbye to her friend, she smoothed her hands over the skirt of her dress and appraised herself again in the mirror. Her reflection showed she was just a normal woman going out for a drink. Still, she worried now if the dress gave the wrong signal. Was the V neckline a little too deep? Perhaps she should go for something less figure-hugging. For a moment, she was tempted to change back into her jeans, keep it casual. After all, she was only going to a pub. But then she studied herself again and realized she was overthinking everything. There was no sign of cleavage, and the green dress skimmed her knees, bringing out the colour of her eyes. It wasn't overtly sexy, but it was both feminine and flattering, and her makeup was kept simple, her hair loose, a few curls styled into natural waves. Nothing looked over the top. Satisfied that she looked okay, she spritzed on perfume she hadn't wore since Charlie's death, the familiar scent evoking memories both tender and painful. Finally, with minutes to spare, she forced earrings into lobes that hadn't quite closed, a pair of demure diamond studs that were a long-ago Christmas gift from her late parents, and slipped her feet into the one decent pair of heels she owned. They had been sitting in the bottom of the wardrobe since the funeral, and although they added inches to her 5'5" frame, they felt unfamiliar and did nothing to steady her trembling legs. At this point, she would give anything for a glass of wine, but she knew she couldn't have one, as the Black Dog Inn where they were meeting was a 15-minute drive away. Megan had told her to make sure she was the one to choose the venue, and to pick somewhere familiar. Truthfully, Harper had struggled to think of a place. She barely went out these days, let alone to the pub, and she didn't fancy going to anywhere she had ever been with Charlie or Alicia. This was supposed to be a fresh start, not a chance to stir up memories. Eventually, she had settled on the Black Dog Inn, remembering she had gone there for lunch with Megan the very first time Megan had caught the train up to Norfolk. The pub was only 2 miles from the station, set beside the River Yare in the suburb of Thorpe St Andrew, and Harper remembered it had a large car park, waterside views and friendly staff. Downstairs, she made a fuss of Bailey, and promised him she wouldn't be gone long. It was just one drink, right? Then, fighting every instinct to call off the date, she forced herself to leave the house, switching on the outdoor light on her way out, knowing that despite the balmy early September temperature, the nights were already drawing in, and it would be dark when she arrived home. By the time she reached the pub car park, Butterflies were swarming in the pit of her stomach, and she was shaking so badly she wasn't sure if she could actually get out of the car. What had she been thinking? This was a terrible idea. Megan was wrong. She wasn't ready. Even as Harper cursed her, a sheepish little voice in the back of her head reminded her that Charlie had been gone for 2 years. This was never going to be easy. But if she wanted another shot at life, she had to move on. The parking spot she had picked faced the door of the pub, and she wondered if Adrian was already inside. It was a few minutes before they were due to meet. Had he decided to get here early so he could get the lay of the land? Maybe choose a table, so he was prepared for their first meet? Or perhaps he was running late and wasn't even there yet. If she sat here long enough, would she see him heading towards the doors? That would buy her some time to decide whether he looked genuine. Maybe he was doing the same as her, sitting in his car and waiting to get to see what she looked like. The thought initially unnerved her further, but then the prick of guilt had her reaching for the door handle. She might be terrified, but she also didn't want to be the person who stood someone up. She had left it too late to cancel, and besides, she was here now. She had to push through with the date. Still, as she forced herself to approach the pub, remembering Megan's words that if things felt off or if it was just too difficult, she only had to stay for a short while. Her belly was fluttering, and her tongue was stuck to the roof of her mouth. The doorknob slipped against her clammy palm as she twisted it open, entering the familiar space, which was quieter than she expected, with only a handful of people at tables and a couple waiting as the barmaid poured their drinks. Harper had assumed that because it was a Friday evening, the pub would be crowded. But today had been warm, and she could see through the open back entrance that the beer garden was full. Fewer people was definitely better, and she stepped up to the bar, looking around anxiously for Adrian, unsure if she was relieved or disappointed when she didn't spot him. Feeling the weight of someone watching her, she glanced at the man behind the counter who was staring at her. Briefly, her cheeks heated. Jesus, she must be sticking out like a sore thumb. He wasn't even hiding the fact he was looking at her. Did he know her? As she looked back at him, a rabbit caught in headlights as she searched her scrambled brain, trying to decide if there was anything familiar about him, and coming up blank. He arched his eyebrows in question. What the hell did he want from her? And then it dawned. He was waiting for her order. Had he asked her what she wanted to drink? Suddenly she wasn't sure, but it would certainly explain the questioning look he was giving her. Unsure if she should wait for Adrian or order a drink, she stuttered before falling silent, and a frown creased his brow. Is everything okay? She heard him now, and he was looking at her, concerned, as if there was something wrong with her. Jesus, she couldn't even hold it together in front of the bartender. Speak, for God's sake. Yes, fine, she managed, finally loosening her clumsy tongue. I'm meeting someone, a date. We haven't met before, so I don't know if he's here yet. I see. So, would you like a drink while you wait? The bartender seemed faintly amused by her information dump. He was a lot younger than her, maybe early 20s, and Harper's cheeks heated, realizing he didn't need to know any of what she had just told him, that he wasn't interested in the ramblings of a 37-year-old basket case of a woman waiting for her internet date. She was about to order a glass of white wine when she heard someone behind her. Harper? The voice was hesitant, and she spun around, finding herself face to face with a man she immediately recognized as Adrian. He looked just like the pictures on his dating profile, which was a relief, and her nerves eased a little. Hi, Adrian. She thrusted her hand at him as he leaned in to kiss her cheek, and there was an awkward moment as they both laughed nervously before backing away, neither kissing nor shaking hands. What would you like to drink? He asked, quickly moving on. I can get them, Harper offered. I was actually about to order a glass of wine. I've got this round. White or red? White. Sauvignon Blanc, if they have it, she told him. Please, she added, remembering her manners. This round indicated that Adrian thought they would be staying for a second one, and she tried to decide how she felt about that as the bartender poured their drinks. The fact he didn't want to cut the evening short suggested his first impression of her was a positive one, and it had Harper considering her initial reaction towards him. Physically, he was attractive. Dark hair, tall and broad-shouldered, and he had a nice smile. He was dressed in jeans and a short-sleeved grey shirt, looking stylish yet casual, and she had to admit, he reminded her of one of the male leads she wrote about. Of course, they had only just met, so time would tell whether they were compatible personality-wise. After paying, Adrian handed her the wine, then raised his pint of lager in a toast. Here's to IntoYou for introducing us. As they clinked glasses, Harper couldn't help but smile. Their date was off to a promising start. She followed him as he led the way to a table towards the back of the pub, cosy and more intimate, away from the other drinkers. So is this your local then? He asked as they took seats opposite one another. Not really. I've been here before though, and it's nice. He didn't need to know about her non-existent social life. What about you? A few times, though not in a while. He had been happy enough letting her pick the pub. Megan had said that was a good sign, and it showed he was respectful that their first date should be on Harper's terms. She soon learnt he had other positives. He was an easy conversationist and asked plenty of questions, seeming genuinely interested in getting to know her and keen to hear about Bailey and how she had rescued him, as well as revealing snippets of his own life. And he had a self-deprecating sense of humour, which she appreciated. Initially, she was nervous, but the evening was flying by, and what Harper had previously pictured being one drink turned into 3, though the following ones were soft, as they were both driving. Adrian had already told her the basics, so she knew he had never married, but now she learnt why, that it had been a combination of being work-focused and never meeting the right one. As he told her that, he seemed to be watching for her reaction, a slow smile spreading across his face and making his eyes crinkle at the corners when he added, "Now I'm making more of an effort to find her." When her stomach fluttered again, it had nothing to do with nerves. Of course, it was only their first date, so she shouldn't jump ahead, but this was all really promising. She had envisioned the whole online dating thing being a lot tougher, so it was a pleasant surprise just how easy it had been, and by the time Adrian walked her out to her car, she was relaxed in his company. "I've had fun tonight," he said, lingering close by, his hands in his pockets as Harper clicked the fob at her Volkswagen. "I have too," she agreed, keeping her tone light. "So, would you like to go out with me again?" She paused, opening the door and turning to face him, smiling and secretly delighted that he had asked. "Yes, I would like that." "Good." That was when he caught her off guard, leaning in quickly to kiss her, seizing the moment when her lips parted in surprise to push his tongue into her mouth. The move startled her, and her first instinct was to push him away. Whether it was the pressure of her palms against his chest or her murmur of shock, he sharply backed up, hands raised in apology. "I'm sorry, that was too soon." He slipped his hands back in his pockets, looking sheepish as Harper's heart raced. "Yes," she managed, crossing her arms defensively and not adding that the last person to kiss her like that was Charlie. Maybe she was overreacting, but she wasn't used to things moving so fast. "I overstepped, and I really am sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Adrian paused, and she could feel him willing her to look up. When she did, making eye contact with him, his contrite smile turned into a sly grin. "You just looked so kissable. I really do like you." His words thawed her a little, her heartbeat quickening at the tiny kick of excitement, knowing he found her attractive. After Charlie had died, she had given up on herself and had lost all confidence. Knowing that she was pushing the buttons of this very good-looking man was giving her a long-overdue ego boost. And aside from surprising, the kiss wasn't unpleasant. Yes, it was too soon, but it showed her the potential of what was to come if they continued to see each other. Something she still wanted to do. It's okay. I just need to take things slower. She hadn't told him about Charlie yet. He knew she had once been married, but immediately assumed it ended in divorce, something she hadn't bothered to correct him on. Eventually she would tell him, but not on their first date.
Understood. And I am sorry. It won't happen again. Not unless you want me to kiss you.
They parted on good terms, Harper relieved and happy the date had gone well, but now exhausted and eager to get home to her dog. Half an hour after walking through her front door, she got a WhatsApp message from Adrian, checking she had arrived home safely. She replied to confirm she had, and thanked him for a lovely evening. He responded with a smiley-faced emoji and a kiss. The following day, he messaged to ask if she still wanted to meet up again. Yes. And as she had picked the venue for their first date, she told him to choose this time. He surprised her by suggesting they stick to the same pub. The black dog was fine with her, and it was comfortable and familiar. They made plans to meet later in the week, and she spent the rest of the day with a foolish grin on her face, unable to stop thinking about him. When Megan had proposed the idea of joining IntoYou, Harper had been convinced it wouldn't work, but all it had taken was one date to find someone she was compatible with. She had heard so many horror stories over the years about online dating, but this had been straightforward. Adrian seemed genuinely nice and was really easy to get on with, and he appeared to really like her. The feeling was mutual. Finally, her luck was changing. Chapter 3. It was Sunday morning, and the sun was warm enough for Harper to enjoy her first cup of coffee in the garden. According to the forecast on her little portable radio, it was going to be a warm one, which didn't surprise her, as the sky was already a cloudless, vivid blue. It was perhaps the weather that was putting her in such a good mood, and the infectious music the DJ was playing helped. But deep down, she knew the reason she couldn't stop smiling was down to her date. It hadn't even been a day and a half since their first date, but Adrian was already messaging her a fair bit, and she was looking forward to seeing him again later in the week. As if on cue, her phone buzzed, and a good morning text pinged up on the screen. This was all going so well. She hadn't expected to click with someone so easily. Megan was right, and Harper had admitted so when they had spoken after her date. Joining a dating site had been a smart move. It was already doing wonders for her confidence. She couldn't remember the last time she had woken up so happy. Well, actually, that was a lie. It was before Charlie's accident. Every morning since his death, her first conscious thought was that she was a widow, before remembering everything that had led to that outcome. So it was a pleasant surprise that the last 2 days had started more positively. Of course, she had thought of Charlie, remembering he was no longer here and the circumstances of the car accident that had killed him. But beyond that had been a glimmer of positivity, a hope that perhaps she could find her way out of this dark place. As she shaded her phone with one hand and replied to Adrian, she was tempted to ask him if he fancied meeting up for a walk that afternoon. Why wait until Friday to see him? She had already planned on taking Bailey somewhere different today. The forecast was for uninterrupted sunshine, and given they were already into September, this might be one of the last weekends, weather-wise, before the nights really drew in. So far, they had stuck to local walks, but Bailey deserved new smells and experiences, and going further afield would be good for Harper's confidence. It would be nice to spend this gorgeous day with Adrian, too. It would be relaxed and casual, giving them a chance to get to know each other better. Harper had been thinking about going to one of the parks in Norwich, but perhaps they could head to the beach instead. The coast wasn't far from where she lived, and she hadn't been since Charlie was alive. The idea of breathing in the salty air and the warm, shifting sand catching between her toes was appealing, and she was suddenly filled with an overwhelming urge to go. She had always loved the beach, the infinity of the sea and calming sound of the waves lapping against the shore. Acting in the moment and outside of her comfort zone, she made the suggestion. Then the nerves kicked in as she waited for Adrian's response. The blue ticks on WhatsApp told her he had read the message, and she could see he was typing, but then he stopped and disappeared offline. She was a fool, and sickness churned in the pit of her stomach. What the hell had she just done? This wasn't her. She didn't usually behave spontaneously. It was totally out of character. They had only met for the first time on Friday night, and now she wanted to see him just 2 days later. It was too soon. Stupid Harper. The next 10 minutes dragged, and she was convinced she had blown everything as she tried to resist repeatedly checking her phone for a response and failing miserably. What an idiot. Everything had been fine, and she should have left things how they were, especially as they already had plans to meet up. When her handset vibrated on the table, the noise making her jump, she snatched it up cautiously, both dreading and eager to read Adrian's reply.
I would have loved to, but I'm really sorry. I'm down in Essex visiting an old school friend. Looking forward to seeing you on Friday, though. Kiss, kiss, kiss.
Okay, that wasn't too bad. Yes, she was disappointed she wouldn't get to see him, but she hadn't messed up. And of course he was going to have Sunday plans. She hadn't given him any notice. The 3 kisses at the end of his message also made her a little giddy. Until now, he had used the occasional one to end his messages, but he wouldn't put 3 unless he liked her, right? Realizing she was grinning inanely at her phone, foolish heat crept into her cheeks. She was acting like a teenage girl and needed to pull herself together. Still, her smile remained, and she was determined to enjoy her day with Bailey, even if Adrian wouldn't be joining them. Perhaps the park would be the better option, as it was just the 2 of them. The beach would probably be busier, given it was a nice day, and she was still building her way up to crowds. She didn't want to take on too much too soon. Her phone vibrated again as she loaded the car with stuff for Bailey and fastened him into the back seat, and butterflies fluttered when she checked her messages to see that Adrian had sent her a selfie. He was smiling broadly for the camera, looking confident and devilishly handsome in a dark t-shirt. The attached caption read, "Wish I was there," followed by another 3 kisses. Harper replied back, "Me too," and boldly added kisses of her own. As she pulled out of her driveway and onto the country lane, she decided on a whim that she would go to the coast after all. Maybe Galston. It wasn't too far to drive, and this was a new chapter for her, a chance to start over. She didn't need to wait for Adrian to be with her to face a crowded beach. She could handle it on her own. Still, familiar nerves crept in as she neared the coast, and she fought the urge to turn the car around. She could do this. It was a gorgeous day, and she was determined to enjoy it as much as Bailey, knowing that if she did, it would be a huge step forward for her. Here, the parking was free, but the spaces were in demand. She managed to find one, then after taking a moment to reassure herself and calm her nerves, she let Bailey out of the car. Already he was sniffing the ground inquisitively, his tail thumping in excitement at the new experience. They were just like everyone else there. The people around them had no idea what she had been through, or how terrified she was to be there. She would walk with her dog, and she would play with him on the golden sand, and they would be normal, just having a good time. Drawing in deep breaths and painting a smile on her face, they headed down to the promenade. Bailey had to stay on his leash until they had passed the tennis courts, but then Harper set him free, hurling the red ball she had brought, genuinely delighted as he chased after it by the shoreline, for a moment startled, but then fascinated by the sea. After that, she was invested, forgetting about her fear as she experienced what appeared to be Bailey's first ever beach trip. As he had been surrendered to the animal shelter, she didn't know his full history, but she was sure he had never seen the sea before. They played on the sand, and he ran his legs off as he charged after the ball. Then she paddled while he bobbed against the waves, literally swimming doggy paddle. By the time Harper was ready to head back to the car, her boy was exhausted, and she had forgotten to be afraid. She had done it. What might seem petty and ridiculous to some was a huge deal to her. She was learning to live again, and today she had proved to herself it was possible. Walking back along the promenade, a damp Bailey leading the way with his ball proudly in his mouth and his tail wagging furiously, she couldn't help smiling. She had really enjoyed today, and caught up in her happy bubble, she almost missed the young family about to pass them by. Mum pushing a pram, and Dad carrying a sleepy-eyed toddler. Both parents were chatting animatedly, but their conversation abruptly stopped as the man locked eyes with her. He looked shocked. "Adrian?" Harper blurted his name, at first confused. "What are you doing here?" She came to a halt, and Bailey didn't miss the opportunity to plonk his bum down, appreciating the chance to rest his tired legs. Adrian had told her he was in Essex, and for one stupid moment she wondered if the woman with him was the friend he mentioned he was visiting. Perhaps, for whatever reason, they had decided to come here instead. But then her mind was quickly switching through the gears, confusion giving way to suspicion, and then disbelief as he rubbed the toddler's back, and she clocked the gold band on his wedding finger glinting in the sunlight. He definitely hadn't been wearing that ring on Friday night. The heat of humiliation flooded her face as she understood she had been duped. Worse than that, he had made her an unwilling partner in his extramarital activities. How dare he? "Adrian?" The woman he was with, no, not just a woman, his wife, repeated. She appeared to be waiting for an explanation as to who Harper was, and while her gaze flickered between them inquisitively, her brows drew together in what looked like annoyance. Did she suspect who Harper was? Worse still, did she know her husband was on a dating site? Adrian recovered quickly.
"Harper, what a surprise. I didn't expect to see you today."
No shit. "Harper," his wife repeated, her tone cool. "I don't believe we've met."
"I'm sure I've mentioned her before, darling,"
Adrian interjected, keen to cut Harper off before she could respond.
"She's one of my clients. I've been doing some work for her firm."
She wanted to speak up, to correct him, but anger choked her, the words refusing to come. He had lied to them both.
"It's good to see you,"
he smiled.
"Enjoy the rest of your weekend."
He was already leaving, tugging his wife along with his free hand, keen to get away from Harper so she couldn't expose him. It was so wrong. He had 2 young children. One was still a baby, for Christ's sake. Harper didn't want to break up a family, but his wife deserved to know the truth. He was actively looking to meet other women, and Harper would bet her house she was not the first one to fall for his bullshit. She felt physically sick for the woman. "Actually," she called after them. Adrian's shoulders tensed as his wife glanced back, eager to hear whatever it was she had to say. "I'm not one of your husband's clients." "Oh?" was all she got in response, as the woman waited for her to continue.
"Harper, don't."
Adrian's words were laced with a warning. But what could he seriously do? He wasn't the injured party here. Besides, Harper had nothing to lose. "Adrian contacted me on a dating site. IntoYou," she said, ignoring him, her stomach heavy as his wife's face fell. Determinedly, she pushed on. "We met for the first time on Friday night. I promise you I thought he was single. I bloody knew something was going on. The wife slapped him across the cheek, and, shocked, he took a step back.
Jenny, stop it, she's lying.
You said you had to work late on Friday, Jenny accused.
I did work late. Damn it, don't listen to her. She tried to come on to me at work and didn't like it when I knocked her back. This is some petty type of revenge.
It was bullshit, and Harper suspected that Jenny knew it. Still, she looked to Harper for confirmation. I'm telling you the truth. Look on the dating site, you'll see his profile, and check his WhatsApp messages.
You bitch.
Adrian's face twisted with fury, and for a moment Harper wondered if she should have played along. No, screw him! He didn't get to treat people like this. Although she was still angry with him, she was desperately sorry for his family. Being cheated on was really shitty, and Harper wanted to tell Jenny she understood her shock. But she knew the woman was probably just as mad with her right now, even though she had done nothing wrong. I'm so sorry, she said, in way of parting, yanking at Bailey's lead. Now she had said her piece, she was eager to get away. As she quickly made her way back along the promenade, she could hear Jenny yelling, and then the toddler bursting into tears. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? For a moment, Harper wasn't so sure. She was blinkered, after all. The anger she had been holding on to evaporated suddenly, leaving her feeling guilty and foolish. Surely there had been signs. Had she really been stupid enough to miss them? Back in the pub car park, Adrian had suddenly come on too strong. At the time, she had forgiven him, still exhilarated by how well their date had gone and putting it down to the fact he must really like her. Now she understood that he had probably hoped a night of sex was on the cards. Perhaps she should be flattered that he thought she was worth putting in the effort for a second date. But instead, her cheeks burned and tears threatened. He had played her, and she had been stupid enough to fall for every lie that came out of his mouth. He must have thought she was such an easy target. She was so caught up in feeling sorry for herself, she wasn't paying attention as she crossed the promenade, heading towards the steps that led up into the car park. Someone yelled, but the warning was too late, and before Harper could register anything, she was knocked flying off her feet.
Chapter 4. Hopper is playing on the beach with her dog when I spot her, throwing a ball towards the incoming waves and smiling in delight as the animal charges into the water to retrieve it. And I can't help but consider this as another sign that she is supposed to be in my life. I had recognized her immediately, even with her honey blonde hair tied back in a loose ponytail. That pale blue sundress she has on, the one with the spaghetti straps that are begging to be ripped, is what she wears in the photo on her IntoYou profile. I had forgotten how pretty she is, but there is something more there now, a sadness that can't be shifted. It's even there in her smile, and her sea-green eyes are haunted, reminding me she has experienced things she will never forget. If you had asked me about her before, I would have told you she is a looker, that she is absolutely my type. But I knew she was unobtainable. I would never be able to have her in the way I wanted. But now, things are different, and this new vulnerability she wears as a cloak is intoxicating. I would have walked away. I did walk away. But the universe works in mysterious ways, placing her in my path. And now, I am wondering if fate is really a thing, and if Harper Reed is supposed to be mine. There is no one I have to answer to. I am the master of my own future. How bittersweet it would be to have her. Everything would be coming full circle. Of course, she doesn't see me. I am just another face on the crowded beach. Still, the flicker of hope melts into bitter disappointment as she glances my way before heading back up to the promenade, the wet dog shaking disgusting germs everywhere. She doesn't recognize me at all. In a way, that makes it easier to follow her. I am just another casual beachgoer heading back to his car, and I am only a short distance behind her when she abruptly stops.
Adrian?
If I pause, then it will be too obvious that I'm being nosy, and I know all about discretion. So instead, I keep my head down, slowing my pace as I cross to the other side of the walkway. I can still hear enough of the conversation to understand there is a love triangle going on. The man, Adrian, has a family, and Harper wasn't expecting that. She looks bewildered and so upset, and I am waiting for her to flee. What I don't expect is for her to throw Adrian under the bus, telling his wife exactly what he has been up to. Adrian, of course, is furious. It seems to me he deserves to be brought down a peg or two. Harper's response was ballsy, and my appreciation of her grows stronger, as does my intrigue. Who could have guessed that beneath her quiet personality lurks a little bit of fire? Yes, she is upset, but it's better that Harper found out the truth. A man like Adrian doesn't deserve a woman like her. I am tempted to follow the family, find out where they live, and dish out a little retribution on Harper's behalf. Maybe slash Adrian's car tires. But it doesn't look like they will be moving anytime soon. The wife is livid, and the kids crying as Adrian tries to smooth over his cheating with a bunch of bullshit lies. Instead, I continue after Harper, wondering if I should speak to her. This might be a good opportunity to say hello and check she is okay. I could always tell her what I witnessed. Maybe she will be vulnerable enough to let me be a shoulder to cry on. As I work the idea through in my head, I hear a yell and look up to see a cyclist who is travelling too fast along the promenade. It's too late to do anything, and a second later, the cyclist, his bike, and Harper all crash to the floor. It's the perfect chance to intervene, play the hero for Harper, and get chatting to her. Seizing the opportunity, I stride towards the scene.
Chapter 5.